No one lived as extravagantly as the famously wealthy Vanderbilt family, whose life often resembled a true fairy tale filled with luxury and opulence. They spared no expense on magnificent mansions, grand yachts, expensive fashion, and lavish parties, turning each event into an embodiment of wealth and status. At first glance, their existence seemed like a noble and carefree wonder, but behind this superficial beauty lay a darker, more complex reality than even the most perceptive observers could imagine. The Vanderbilt family history begins with a man named Jan Aertsen, who arrived in America from post-war Europe in 1645. At that time, he was a humble servant, just beginning his life in the New World, working for the owners of a wealthy and noble family called the Coven Vanans. This humble beginning, full of hardships and trial, predetermined the future development of his life and ultimately that of his entire descendants. Through hard work and perseverance, Jan Aertsen soon transformed his life, leading to the emergence of a new, notable name associated with his origins and new endeavors. For a long time, he could not have imagined that his surname would become one of the most recognizable and respected in the history of American wealth. For his future surname, he decided to combine the Dutch word van, meaning van, with the name of his hometown. Thus, the surname was born, which later became synonymous with luxury and power. However, many years passed on the path to the heights of success, and only over time did the Vanderbilts become associated with a special kind of fame, often remembered for their sternness and inflexibility. The family's first wealth appeared with his great-great-great-grandson, also named Cornelius Vanderbilt, or more commonly, Commodore. He grew up in conditions far from luxury on Staten Island and managed to amass wealth through his skill in the shipping and railroad industries, into which he invested around the mid-1800s. In short, his efforts led to his and his family's relocation to Manhattan, where he built a house, the very one destined to become a symbol of wealth, now located in the affluent Greenwich Village, and completed around 1847. However, by the time the Commodore was on his deathbed, his health had significantly deteriorated, and he remained almost entirely in his mansion for 8 months. Shortly thereafter, in his final moments, he revealed to his heirs that his fortune exceeded $100 million. By today's standards, this would be over $3 billion. Before leaving this world, Cornelius Vanderbilt had to make important decisions regarding the future of his accumulated wealth. He initially decided to donate $1 million for the construction of an educational institution called Vanderbilt University, which was meant to become a legacy for Nashville, the city where he was born and raised. Additionally, he needed to determine how exactly to divide his remaining funds among his quite large and diverse group of potential heirs. When all the relatives finally gathered to read the will, they were overwhelmed by a remarkable mixture of feelings. Some perhaps couldn't believe their eyes upon seeing that the majority of the wealth had been passed on to only one of his descendants, his eldest son, William Henry Vanderbilt, better known as Billy. Thus, a wealthy family faced new horizons, new challenges, and undoubtedly a new perspective on possession, power, and the inheritance that was to continue even after their departure. It was no coincidence that the other family members reacted with fierce indignation and deep suspicion. They couldn't ignore the fact that he had another son and 9 daughters, none of whom received any inheritance. Their outrage was so intense that they decided not to accept this situation. Billy's 3 siblings took the matter to court, accusing him of hiring a spiritualist who deceived their father into leaving all his money solely to him. In an effort to avoid public humiliation and shame in court, Billy made a deal with his relatives, offering them a small part of the inheritance. By the standards of that time, he already had very little time left to enjoy his great wealth, as he died in 1885, just 8 years after his father's death, who had succumbed to a stroke. Therefore, in such a short period, he managed to double the amount of money he inherited from his parent. It is worth noting that Billy's father was skilled at amassing wealth. He knew how to accumulate a fortune, but did not need it himself, and often said that money only caused him anxiety and worry. He blamed his poor health on his wealth, and frequently looked at his poor neighbors with envy. Most of Vanderbilt's estate was divided between his two eldest sons. The first was Cornelius Vanderbilt II, who, due to his generosity, did not increase the family's wealth, and the second son, William Kissam Vanderbilt, who was more interested in horses than in accumulating a fortune. In 1875, William married a woman named Alva Ising Smith, whom many considered someone seeking only personal gain. Alva had an extravagant taste. She insisted on buying a yacht, loved collecting mansions excessively, and by then, she already owned 9 mansions. But that was not enough for her. She wanted something that couldn't simply be bought with money. High society in New York did not accept the Vanderbilts because they were regarded as newly rich. Their wealth was not strictly inherited. It was acquired through their own labor and investments. In the hope of establishing themselves among the upper classes, Alva decided to focus on architecture and began implementing her idea. 3 years of hard work and substantial financial investment, about $3 million, were spent on building a luxurious mansion. By that time, William and Alva had already had a daughter named Consuelo. Alva, being strict in upbringing, adhered to the principle of discipline, especially concerning her young daughter. She repeatedly used a whip on her and forced her to wear a heavy steel corset designed to correct her posture. Alva sincerely aspired to obtain a royal title that would match her luxurious lifestyle and social status. Her ambition was to marry her daughter into the royal family, and finally, the opportunity arose at a crucial moment. Charles Spencer Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, stepped onto the scene. It is worth noting that Duke also had his own hidden motives and plans. Neither Consuelo nor Duke was initially particularly attached to each other, but this did not prevent their marriage. Ultimately, such a union granted Alva access to the royal branch of the family, expanding her influence and opportunities. At the same time, the Duke of Marlborough saw a chance to resolve his financial difficulties by gaining control over the Vanderbilt's estate, which helped him save his mistress from an impending economic collapse. Miraculously, their marriage lasted 26 years, a considerable length of time, especially since just before the wedding, their daughter Consuelo connected with her future husband, the Duke of Marlborough. Alva, in turn, announced her intention to divorce William Vanderbilt. Such a step was extremely rare and scandalous in the upper society of that time, and she took it because she believed her husband was unfaithful. However, there are other opinions. Many believed that William was not inclined to infidelity. According to these theories, he simply hired a woman who was supposed to become his mistress, which, in William's view, might help him get out of the difficult circumstances of his marriage to Alva. Eventually, William remarried and moved to France, where he was especially passionate about horses, to whom he dedicated himself wholeheartedly. He personally did not harbor much passion for wealth, and, as he said, inherited fortune became a real obstacle on his path to happiness. He acknowledged that he had no hope for the future, and that he had not yet set clear goals or ambitions. Moreover, Vanderbilt's children in the family estate did not achieve success. Cornelius II spent too much money, and William showed more interest in horses than in managing the family fortune. His younger brother George took the stage, driven by his own desire to establish a reputable standing and make a name for himself, independent of family circumstances. George Washington Vanderbilt II dreamed of building a large mansion, the largest one imaginable. He purchased a total of 125,000 acres of land in North Carolina and invited an architect to design a grand estate. His plan was to construct a building with 250 rooms, covering over 17,500 square feet, to emphasize his importance and status. Biltmore Estate rightfully remains the largest private residence ever built in American history. Its grandeur and stunning luxury continue to inspire admiration today, despite the many years that have passed. However, over time, the vast size of this mansion subtly transformed into a serious problem. The construction of such a colossal building had a noticeable negative impact on the Vanderbilts' wealth, as maintaining and caring for the massive house required not only significant effort, but also substantial financial investments. George Vanderbilt and his wife Edith were resolute in their efforts to create this magnificent estate, but circumstances turned in such a way that, by the 10th year of the last century, that is, 1919, their lives changed tragically. George died during a routine appendectomy. Suddenly, all the property was under Edith's full control, and she was responsible for maintaining the estate and the family's financial well-being. Gradually, the family was forced to take a step that most Vanderbilts might have locked away. In 1930, their heir, Edith Cornelia, was invited to open the famous Biltmore estate to the public. This move allowed anyone to glance into the life of America's greatest family, experiencing their classic displays of luxury and splendor, and it happened in the post-war years, in 1934. Gladys Vanderbilt inherited the summer residence called Briars. This mansion, spanning 138,000 square feet and consisting of 70 rooms, was built in 1895 for Cornelius Vanderbilt II. Soon, Gladys began renting it out to the Newport County Historical Society, wishing to preserve it as a historic landmark and ensure its preservation. The rental fee was only $1 per year, making it accessible for various public events. Among the members of this family was Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt, Gladys's brother, famous for squandering the family fortune and known for his rakish character. Their other brother was Cornelius Vanderbilt, often called the Born Vanderbilt, as he spent enormous sums of money trying to appear worthy of high society. In 1896, he declared himself the first heir of the Vanderbilts, thereby reducing the family's fortune, which sparked numerous rumors and debates. Sharp-witted Neil Vanderbilt, having fallen in love with Grace Wilson, faced opposition from his father, who disapproved of their relationship. Ultimately, the young couple decided to elope, which caused great outrage within the family. As a result, his parents disinherited Neil, and when it was time to distribute the assets, he received only $500,000, while his brother Alfred inherited a much larger estate, just under $1 million. Among the brothers, Alfred Gwynn Vanderbilt stood out. He was known for his ability to assess situations calmly, except perhaps when it came to marriage, which, according to some reports, hindered him from making more measured decisions. 7 years after marrying Ellen Tack French, she unexpectedly left their shared home. Presumably, this was due to his having an affair, and his behavior was often coarse and abrupt. Soon after, at the very end of 1915, he boarded the RMS Lusitania, bound for Liverpool off the coast of Ireland on business. However, this trip turned into a tragedy for them. A German torpedo bomber launched a torpedo against the vessel, resulting in irreversible consequences. The Lusitania began sinking rapidly, and it seemed that our hero, Alfred, along with the ship, would go to the bottom. At that moment, he demonstrated his heroism by giving his life vest to a frightened woman holding a child. Over 1,000 people died that day, including Alfred. His death meant that the number of Vanderbilts decreased, but this did not affect the growth of the family's heirs. The reason was that the generation succeeding the older one was almost uninterested in managing the family estate, and the funds seemed to be quickly exhausted. Most of the income came from the railroad business, but by then America was changing rapidly. Railroads were no longer the sole means of transportation for people and goods, as new transportation technologies emerged. In the 1930s, the country's economy suffered severely during the Great Depression, and the Vanderbilt family found itself in a difficult position. Reggie Vanderbilt died young due to his excessive alcohol addiction, leaving his wife and daughter Gloria nearly without means to support themselves. His wife was not related to the Vanderbilts, and therefore could not inherit millions. Meanwhile, 18-month-old Gloria, a great-great-granddaughter of the Commodore, experienced a different fate. When she turned 21, she inherited a vast fortune. However, the Vanderbilt family did not quite approve of Gloria Morgan and her luxurious, flamboyant lifestyle. Her sister Reggie Gertrude was eager to gain custody of the little heiress, and so they all went to court to defend their rights to wealth and prestige. The media planned to stage a real public spectacle over the case. One of the first figures on the defendant's bench was Nurse Gloria Morgan, who offered a negative and rather unflattering portrait of her wealthy adoptive mother, almost as if creating a blacklist. She claimed that their house was in complete disorder, filled with dirt, and that rats had even nested in certain areas. These words served as undeniable evidence that Morgan had shown incredible cruelty towards her young daughter, Gloria. In the subsequent courtroom drama, another shocking testimony was heard from the maid, who criticized Morgan's behavior, claiming she had seen her in bed with another woman, causing a storm in the courtroom. The room was filled with noise and whispers, and the judge had to decide to temporarily remove all present to restore order and continue the proceedings. The most astonishing words came from the youngest Gloria herself, who admitted she was afraid of her mother. This candid revelation unexpectedly shocked everyone present. Morgan's lawyers were clearly stunned, and Gloria's aunt, named Guda, tried to wisely instruct the girl on what to say and how to say it. Her clever plan miraculously worked, and ultimately she was granted custody of Gloria after the court case, which many called the trial of the century. Gloria Vanderbilt had very little contact with her mother, and her relationship was already strained, especially since Gertrude also lacked maternal warmth and care. In her despair, Gloria turned to her mother and nanny for support, as her childhood had been very difficult. It was from this heavy past that she drew strength and decided to dedicate her life to working in the theater. Making her debut on Broadway and appearing in live and recorded television versions of dramatic productions, Gloria, with her angelic face, began her career in the fashion world. By the age of 15, she was already a model, and at the same time, she revealed herself as a much more multifaceted person, a talented artist, whose work soon appeared on a line of scarves. Soon, she received an offer to have her signature and the swan logo placed on the pocket of a pair of blue jeans, marking the beginning of her commercial success in design. At that time, designer Gina's idea was still taking shape, and in this context, the influence of Indian designer Moana Morjani was significant. She suggested making the jeans very tight-fitting, which gained them enormous popularity. After her third marriage, Gloria met director Sidney Lumet Vanderbilt, and they got married. Soon, they had 2 sons, and it seemed she had finally found her true support in this world. For 15 years of her life, she was married to Wyatt Emery Cooper, who died on the operating table at the age of 50. Ironically, he was the first young man she married on July 22, 1908. Soon after, her 23-year-old son Carter tragically and horribly died after jumping out of a 14th-floor penthouse window. Living among the famous and proud clans of New York was a man named Anderson Cooper, a descendant of Vanderbilt. This son of a renowned family achieved significant success in life through his perseverance and hard work. Unlike some other members of this family, he recalled that at the very beginning of his journey, his mother assured him that he would not have any hereditary trust fund. Cooper deliberately avoided using the Vanderbilt name and the word Rose in his quest for fame. He wanted to prove that his own achievements and effort were more important than inherited wealth. A vivid testament to his life is that the Vanderbilt fortune, once seemingly limitless, has now been depleted. There are several reasons why, in the 19th century, during the height of family wealth, members of the Vanderbilt lineage would gather together for meetings where ideas came alive and fate made itself known. When they looked around the room filled with descendants, one surprising truth became clear. None of them truly owned a substantial estate. Not one Vanderbilt was a billionaire today. None lived in luxurious mansions, owned prestigious yachts, or participated in glamorous parties, which once were considered the main feature of life. For about 100 years, the Vanderbilt family enjoyed a life of opulence, living amidst wealth and splendor. Some believe that the founder of this vast fortune, a Commodore, consciously missed important lessons that could have preserved their legacy. He prepared his heirs for an easy and carefree life, but did not teach them how to manage and preserve wealth properly. Many think he should have acted differently, making every effort to pass on values and principles, similar to what the famous patriarch John Jacob Astor did. His idea was to establish a trust divided equally. Half of the funds would go to his children, and the other half to grandchildren, with the goal of maintaining equal division for future generations. As a result, the family learned skills of capital preservation, sustainable wealth, and responsibility. In addition, one of the reasons behind the rapid decline of the Vanderbilts was their homes, built during the peak era. The family hired the most renowned architects, creating mansions in New York or palaces in the countryside. The expenses for construction and decoration were limitless. Nothing was spared for beauty and magnificence of the residences. However, surprisingly, many of these luxurious mansions were only used for a few weeks each year, as summer homes often remained empty for most of the time. In the case of city halls, the story was similar. They were magnificent, but passed down through generations. They often remained unoccupied or were simply put up for sale. As a result, over the decades spent building and acquiring real estate in New York at great expense, by the 1940s, most of these buildings had fallen into ruins, remnants of their former glory. And even when it was time to leave this world, the Vanderbilts did so with the same sparkle and extravagance as their entire lives. Their departure was marked by flair, and saying goodbye to land involved a significant financial cost, for they knew how to leave behind not only wealth, but also a lifestyle worthy of remembrance. On Staten Island, there is a particular grave serving as a memorial that unites an entire family. Inspiration for creating this unique monument was drawn from the famous architect and designer Richard Morris Hunt, whose works are rightfully regarded as masterpieces of architecture and design. The idea was inspired by an ancient French ensemble, an abbey built during the Vanderbilt era, possessing a special status and distinctive architecture. Over time, this monument, which includes a family tomb and a mosque, has become one of the most prominent and visited historical and architectural attractions in New York, attracting tourists and architecture enthusiasts from around the world. Thanks to its unique appearance and historical significance, this family memorial remains one of the gems of the city's heritage to this day. Its elegance and distinctive style allow visitors to feel the atmosphere of past eras and show respect for the memory of departed ancestors. This monument has become a symbol of family continuity and eternal remembrance, as well as an example of how art and architecture can preserve important stories and traditions. Thank you for your attention to our edition dedicated to the history and monuments of the past. If you are interested in discovering new and captivating stories, you can share your impressions and continue exploring with us by reading our publications. Don't forget to browse other interesting facts and insights by visiting our official page and expanding your knowledge about the world around you.